Things are about to get much, much worse in Ukraine. And we had some breaking news just a short time ago. A member of parliament has been killed by the NATO-led Ukrainian forces in the Donetsk People's Republic. Now, I say NATO-led forces because that's who's calling the shots here. That's who's directing the traffic on these drone strikes and on these himars attacks. And so earlier today, we got word that the deputy of the Donetsk People's Republic of Parliament, Maria Pirogova, was killed as a result of Ukrainian shelling on Donetsk. Moscow responded. And the Russians this afternoon saying, we see no prospects now for negotiations. That's coming from the Kremlin. We see now no prospects for negotiations.
I mean, that is a scary thing to say because it has been Russia that's been offering peace talks all along.
Repeatedly.
And so now if they're saying that's off the table, not that the West was going to show up anyway, they've repeatedly said, we just see no... that's interesting, but then it's just so awful. It's a scary thing to hear.
So, and also the increased attacks. So instead of peace talks, and we hear more blustering from the United States, and we hear more from Europe as well. So the increased attacks have been happening over the past 2 days. We'll have more on that in a minute in Donetsk specifically, but things are about to get much worse in the NATO war with Russia. The U.S. knows that a massive attack from Russia is coming, and they're doing their best to pretend that Russia is defeated and broken. Listen to this hilarious propaganda from Secretary Blinken yesterday.
We've seen a massive mobilization this summer, 300,000. Not all of that has actually been fully mobilized, probably about a third. But what happens? You get forces that are barely trained, poorly equipped, not winterized, who are thrown into this mix. And it's terrible, but they're also not, generally speaking, particularly effective units. Even as they've mobilized, or in the midst of mobilizing 300,000 people, there's another side of the story. Since February 24th, well over 1 million Russians have left their country. Some to escape potential mobilizations, others because this is not generally what they want to live with. That is terrible.
That's just not true.
It's just not true at all.
Russia actually announced that people who were going to enlist, who were, what do they call it, sort of off duty?
Yeah,
the reservist,
yeah.
I'm sorry, that they would be sent to training first.
Right.
And that anyone who enlisted beyond that was going to training. And they even released their budget and like their schedule. That was all, we could read that. So I guess he assumes we have not read that.
It's ridiculous. And we've spoken to sources in Crimea as well who were actually at recruitment stations and said the line was out the door. And I mean, like the people were lining up. They had to turn people away because they had too many people. So first of all, and then also that Russia isn't winterized.
Right.
Like Russia invented winter. Yeah. Like Russia, winter didn't exist until Russia came along. Like winterized.
You're not seeing the videos of Putin walking around with no shirt on in the snow. Now, come on.
They're not winterized.
Or the Russians who drill a hole in the ice on New Year's Day. Like that's their thing. They can handle cold. Mm-hmm. In fact, in some places in Russia, spit freezes before it hits the ground. It's so cold.
Yeah. So Russians don't know anything about winter. So there's this three-pronged attack that's now unfolding on Russia happening at this hour. This means we are actively escalating the war against Russia instead of de-escalating the war. And when I say three-pronged, I mean today, 3 prongs of this attack. Cyber attack, physical attack with using U.S. himars, and the economic attack in the form of oil price caps. So this morning, let's start with the cyber attack. We learned of a massive cyber attack against the banking infrastructure in Russia this morning. We're not sure when the cyber attack, where it technically originated from, but I'll give you a few guesses. In fact, I'll put up a poll here on the screen. I'll take a poll up here on the screen. Do you think the attack on the Russian banking infrastructure came from A, Papua New Guinea, B, the United States and the United Kingdom, or C, Iceland? Like if you had to guess of those troublemakers, who would you say?
That is a hard one.
It's probably really tough.
Does Papua New Guinea have a hacking population that's robust?
Does Iceland? No, the answer, of course,
Don't prove it to me.
Okay.
I don't want anyone to prove it to me.
Yeah,
If you're an extreme hacker from Papua New Guinea, I see you.
There's like a heavy Papua New Guinea like hacking farm. That's
Well,
going
I mean, if you had
Guinea
said
pigs.
Argentina, I'd be like, you know.
So we don't know exactly, but I'm guessing. And the cyber attack was focused on the Russian banking sector this morning. So this happened earlier this morning. Russian majority state-owned bank VTB came under a huge cyber attack conducted from foreign countries, according to VTB. They say that customer data is protected. They've taken measures to secure the funds. No customer data was breached, but it was massive, they said. But of course, if you want to destabilize a country, this is what you do, right? You destabilize its currency and its economy, and that's exactly what the West is trying to do with Russia. So we will monitor these cyber attacks that continue against the banking infrastructure in Russia. So far, this hasn't happened to the Russian ruble. That has gone up in value while the euro has declined. But something the West is not hiding, of course, is the oil price cap. Now this is the economic warfare that's unfolding. So yesterday officially started the EU and the G7 countries in Australia agreeing to introduce a $60 per barrel price cap on all purchases of Russian oil. So that means any transactions over this price limit will be prohibited from receiving any brokerage or any shipping or any insurance on other services. Now, historically, most of the insurance has been, came out of London. That's where like insurance was invented. And so what does this mean exactly for Russia? Well, Russia says they have yet to respond. And they're not responding yet. Russia says they have yet to respond. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov says the decision on retaliatory measures is still being prepared. But of course, one thing is obvious: we will not recognize any price caps.
Actually, did you know that insurance was it was born out of shipping?
Right.
Out of the shipping industry, because if
Out
you
of
were
London.
investing in something that was coming on a ship during globalization, and it sank, you lost everything.
And it's out of London, right? Yeah.
I believe it was, mostly with the
Dutch
Spanish, the Portuguese, and the English.
Yeah, the Dutch East India company. So they know a thing or two about insurance. Now, if they can't get insurance on this, what are they going to do? So Russia says they have yet to respond. They're going to respond to this. We will wait for what the Russian response will be. Everyone always wants Russia to respond like right away, like immediately. And if there's anything you should know about Russians, they don't do that. They take their sweet time and then they respond. And so everyone's wondering, like, all of these attacks that have been happening against the Donbass and Donetsk and the cyber attacks and those, like, are they going to respond? Yeah, they are. It's just not going to be on your timetable, Western powers. So what is going to happen here? This is the 6th round of sanctions imposed on Russia by European leaders. And as Ursula von der Leyen says, it has 3 main objectives in these oil caps. Watch.
This price cap has 3 objectives. First, it strengthens the effect of our sanction. Second, it will further diminish Russia's revenues. And thirdly, at the same time, it will stabilize global energy markets because it allows some Russian seaborne oil to be traded, brokered, transported by EU operators to third countries, as long as it is sold below the cap. So this price cap will benefit directly emerging and developing economies, and it will be adjustable over time so that we can react to market developments.
Okay, so that's
market developments.
Right.
But you're perverting market developments.
Right. Well, no, and it's going to really help. I mean, because they have a long history, the EU does, of really helping emerging countries.
Yeah.
Like, really? She's like openly saying that this is going to help African countries. This is going to help emerging markets. Sure. Well, I can't wait to see how this really affects those people. So again, we're waiting on Russia's response to this. While we do, what will they do? That's the big question. Stop selling uranium to the EU? That would send their nuclear reactors totally offline, because right now, all of the uranium, the enriched uranium in the United States and the EU, mostly all comes from Russia. So now during an energy crisis, what if Putin just flips that switch? Not buying any uranium from us anymore. We're selling it to China. We're selling it to Japan because their nuclear reactors are going back online. So we're going to give you the big middle finger. You want to do these price caps?
Well, in fact, what if Russia just says, this is not the price. Sorry, we'll sell it to other people who will actually pay the price, which it does seem to be doing with China.
Right.
China is paying, I believe it's 87, 89.
78, yeah.
$78 a barrel right now, because that's what market forces are dictating, not these caps. And in fact, I was somewhere in Germany over the weekend, and there were protests in a small German town called Freiburg. I don't know if I'm saying it properly. It might be Freiburg. And there were people carrying signs saying, "Stop in sanctions," with a Z, which I didn't use a translator, but I'm pretty sure that means no more sanctions. Why? Because they were saying, stop hurting our economy for another country. We don't agree with this war. And what's going to happen is that they just won't buy enough, because Russia will say it's not available for you, and it will hurt that economy even further.
So, yeah, and this is exactly the case. And here's the thing: they'd be officially screwed over without like nuclear power and without anything else from Russia if they decide to stop selling this stuff to them. So, number one, let's unpack these 3 points that she makes. Number one, it strengthens the effect of our sanctions, she said. Yes, just like all of the other sanctions that have some negative effect on Russia, but not much at all. And it's actually made the relationship with China, India, and South Africa, Indonesia, and other countries much stronger. So they've inadvertently shot themselves in the foot, crushing the euro. And now people are running away from the US dollar. So this is going to have a much bigger impact on the European Union as one of the main consumers of oil in the world. So good job on screwing yourself in this regard.
I was going to say, you want to unite people around a common enemy. That's the kind of thing you do. Like, you just made those, like, anything that Putin is saying negative about us, every time they do something like that, that just solidifies that to these BRICS nations or everybody that's getting on board with this, and it just like completely ruins your cause.
Well, and it's not even just the BRICS nations, but you're right about that, because that really solidified like this BRICS power. I mean, it was kind of a loose affiliation a number of years ago. It's really been solidified with a number of agreements over the past year and a half. But OPEC was not like a huge Putin fan. Now we have OPEC Plus. They had come out repeatedly. We covered this on the show, saying, don't put these sanctions on Russia. Don't put these sanctions. So not only BRICS, now you've like rallied around people who were like maybe not your biggest ally in the past or your biggest friend in the past. So now you're like really pushing them in that direction. So where was I?
On her second point, I believe.
Second point. So the second point, it will further diminish Russia's reserves, she says, revenues. So yes, this will probably happen. And according to experts, Russia will lose some revenue. It will be forced to sell some of these resources to partners at some higher prices. But what people don't understand is that Russia is already selling oil at $78 a barrel to some of its partners in Asia and the Middle East as of this morning. So imagine this, a scenario where, because we've seen already there's some nefarious play going on where like people are getting Russian oil by going to China. We've already seen this happening, right? So imagine that's what's going to happen. You're going to have like Germany and countries in Europe buying Russian oil, not from Russia directly, but they'll just get it through some of the Asian markets like they've already been doing.
Yeah, I mean, Europe is clearly virtue signaling all of these things that it wants to do that's anti-Russian, but at the same time still trying to do things that help it to save face. For instance, paying into Gazprom using rubles. They're saying that we put money in that account in euros and Gazprom exchanges it, not us. So even though Russia had said that, they're like, we're not going to comply, but they are on a technicality.
Right. So number 3 on the list is it will stabilize global energy markets, she says. Stabilize global energy markets? With this move? What is she talking about? I think she's absolutely insane to think that we're going to stabilize the energy markets. Right. They're so stable right now. And throwing this uncertainty into it really helps stabilize things. If there's one thing markets love, they love uncertainty.
And human perversion.
A guy walking on a tightrope around across the Grand Canyon or whatever. A guy's like, I'm going to step on this and bounce it and make it more stable.
Yeah.
Right? So if anything, this is going to create mass havoc and drive prices up. Again, I said, OPEC Plus, they were pissed at the United States and Europe for putting these sanctions in the first place. They warned the United States not to impose Russian sanctions. And they are, there's a line here that we could see forecasts. We are seeing forecasts north of $100 a barrel for oil, even without inflation as a factor in this. So we'll watch and see what energy markets suddenly start stabilizing, and all of your energy bills suddenly start going back down. Like, we'll see. We'll watch. We'll keep our eye on that. It'll be very easy for us to tell. Are you paying more for natural gas? Are you paying more for oil? Are you paying more for diesel? We'll be watching Russia's response. So overall, support is waning right now. And it all comes at a time when many European leaders are starting to actively distance themselves from Ukraine and Vladimir Zelensky. So former French presidential candidate and MP Nicolas Dupont-Aignan stated that the European Union should stop supplying weapons to Ukraine, lift anti-Russian sanctions, and calm down Vladimir Zelensky in order to avoid Europe's economic suicide, he calls it. This was in a radio show. I listened to the radio show and I translated it for you from yesterday. Really interesting that you have French leaders saying, sorry, Zelensky, we're not standing by while Europe is destroyed. Listen.
Si les députés de l'Essonne, notre invité ce dimanche, Nicolas Dupont-Aignan, Joe Biden
I'll go ahead and translate. Do you want me to summarize for anybody who's listening? She was just introducing him. So he is saying it's our duty to defend the sovereignty of Ukraine in the face of aggression. And I condemned this aggression. However, I think today that the fight is drifting. I mean by that, for France, for me, should distance itself and have a position of something, because Zelensky's goal is to defend Ukraine, is to sacrifice its people, of being the instrument of Russia's, I missed it, and this is a serious mistake. Yes, very serious. The people of the UK are opening up never before, because today we have gone astray. And I persist in thinking, first of all, that this conflict could have been avoided if France had the respective agreements. I'm sorry, it's too fast.
That's all right. You did.
I did my best.
Yeah. But anyway, the bottom line is we need to stop this. And we aligned ourselves too closely with Zelensky, and now Europe is facing economic suicide. We shouldn't be a part of it anymore. And we should be able to basically pull back, stop supplying weapons to Ukraine, lift these Russian sanctions. Wow, so there's some people who are not as crazy as the rest of Europe. It's good to hear. But sadly, he's not in power. But he was the opposition against Macron. So this isn't the first time French leaders have said no to things that the United States have done. I remember covering this a number of years ago. Jacques Chirac, back in 2003, said no to the invasion of Iraq. He's like, no, we're not doing it. And then he ended up being correct about it. You know, when it turned out there were no weapons of mass destruction, and it turned out being a 20-year morass of disaster. And Jacques Chirac was right about that. So now to the
that's how we ended up. Sorry, that's how we ended up with freedom fries. Remember?
Yes.
The freedom fries, because we wouldn't use the word French.
But the French did not invent fries. The Belgians did. And in fact, it was American soldiers who were fighting in Belgium who ate these deep fried potatoes. And because in Belgium they speak French, they called them Frenchies. And they were created during you want this history of French fries? They were created during this deep freeze where they couldn't fish out of the river and they needed to fry something. So they fried up potatoes.
It's a World War I story.
So they never were made in French.
We learned that at a Belgian fry museum.
We did go to the Belgian Friet Museum. And so now in our family, we don't call them French fries because the kids are very anti that. They're like, they're Belgian frites.
So let's talk about the physical attacks now. Thank you for your food break. Now
You're welcome.
Now I'm hungry. So we got the economic, we got the cyber, and now here's the physical attacks. We talked about it at the beginning of the show. For the past 24 hours, we've seen something interesting: long-range weapons being used to attack deep inside of Russian territory against two different air bases over the past, three now, but the first two were about 700 kilometers inside of Russia. Now, this is important for a couple of reasons. For one, this is the largest attack that we've seen this far from the Ukrainian border. Yesterday, we saw multiple drone attacks against a Russian long-range nuclear bomber airport 700 kilometers inside of Russia. Here was the moment those drones attacked. Watch. Caught on camera. CCTV camera. There you go. So now Russia shot down these drones, but the debris ended up landing on the airport. It ended up killing 3 Russian airmen as a result of it. It did some slight damage to 2 aircraft and the runway. As military analysts have rightly pointed out, these airports house Russian nuclear long-range weapons aircraft. So they knew what they were hitting. 700 kilometers inside. And where do you think Ukrainians? No. It was NATO forces using these HIMARS. So here's another attack that just happened overnight. This is at a separate. This is at a separate plant. This is at a separate airport. Check this one out. This is another attack that just happened in the city of Kursk, using HIMARS. Take a look at this. So this is overnight. Again, another attack. This one's actually closer to the Ukrainian border. But again, another attack on one of those airports. Again, using HIMARS. So as journalist Nibohosa Malik points out, while Ukraine's drone strike on the Russian air bases was over 700 kilometers from the territory of Kiev controls may look bad at first glance, he writes, remember that everything they do is for public relations. It's for PR. So in other words, he's saying that their military objective is to get more weapons, ammunition, equipment, and money from the West. And boy, do they get it, because the United States just announced this afternoon that they are going to ramp up production of new ammunition, Soviet-style ammunition for Ukraine. So they can use their Soviet weapons using, we're going to make Soviet-style ammunition for Ukraine. And it can't be a coincidence also that all of this happened when Victoria Nuland was in town. On the same day that these attacks were launched, she was there. Obama's regime change lackey, Victoria Nuland, staying overnight in Kiev, meeting with Volodymyr Zelensky, and so she could give him a big hug. Here he is. So this is all part of the plan. Victoria Nuland completed a 2-day visit to Kiev, stayed in the city overnight. So Malik also keenly observed something that I missed. He says, quote, I can't be the only one who noticed that the Wall Street Journal ran a story about how the United States supposedly tinkered with the HIMARS launchers that it sent to Kiev so they can't fire long-range missiles. On the same day the Ukrainians attacked 2 air bases 500 plus kilometers away, is it a limited hangout so that the United States doesn't get blamed for this or whatever else is coming?
I do also find this a perplexing story. Especially because the Ukrainians can read it. It's almost like, we don't trust you with this. We're going to have to put some training wheels on your bicycle.
Right.
You can use this, but we're not taking the training wheels off. Or like I said in the news later today, it's like a child lock.
But it clearly didn't work. Like it's a garbage story. So I think Nibohosa is right. Like, we are about to see something big. Like, that's the point, right? He said the same exact thing happened on the Kerch Bridge. Right, we saw the attack on, and the United States came out and basically confirmed the attack on Daria Dugina. And then 2 days later, we see this attack on the Kerch Bridge. And then where they get to say, no, it's not us, it's not us, it's not us. So we're about to see something big. So this whole Wall Street Journal propaganda piece where the Wall Street Journal breaks this story, they also send in a reporter who's embedded with the Ukrainian soldiers covering these HIMARS at the same time this is all happening. Like, the whole thing stinks. It's propaganda. Watch this Wall Street Journal piece.
We're here in southern Ukraine, where the military has given us very rare access to HIMARS, which are very mobile artillery devices. The Americans have given the Ukrainians 16 of these since June.
Хімарс – це, якщо не одна з найефективніших, то саме ефективніша установка на полі бою.
These HIMARS have been critical to some of the recent counteroffensives the Ukrainians have launched against Russian positions. The systems carry usually 6 missiles, which at the moment have a range of 80 kilometers, allowing the Ukrainians to strike deeper into Russian-held territory than any other system they've had.
So that's interesting. 80 kilometers.
Do you have to wear a tight t-shirt if you go to Ukraine? It's just what all men do there.
I guess so. You have to show off your bravado. So we'll do whatever it takes to keep sending weapons. And we want Ukraine to go back to its February territory, which includes the Donbass, the area that they've been carrying out a genocide in for the past 9 years. So here is the Donbass yesterday. This is Donetsk, the civilian area attacked by NATO-led forces. Watch, this is in Donetsk. This is a civilian area. Okay, the civilian apartment complexes, all destroyed by NATO-led forces from Ukraine. Just attacking right inside Donetsk. But this is every day there. But they've been ramping up, of course, over the past few days. So over the past 48 hours, we've seen increased attacks. Here's Secretary Antony Blinken on what we intend to do in Ukraine going forward.
Just came back from NATO meetings in Romania, and on the margins of that, G7 meetings, the president, of course, has had many, and I can tell you that the commitment to Ukraine, to helping Ukraine defend itself, to helping Ukraine deal with the Russian aggression, to helping Ukraine get back territory that was seized from it, to supporting it on a humanitarian basis, to support it economically, that commitment is strong, it's robust, and it's Europe, and it's countries well beyond Europe, too.
So we're going back to February land in Ukraine. So here's how do you engender love among the people? You just constantly attack them. We're going to take back the Donbass. So what we're going to do? We're going to attack civilians. That's how we're going to win the hearts and minds of those people
who voted not to be a part of Ukraine.
Right, who voted overwhelmingly to be a part of Russia. So this is Russian territory. And as we mentioned at the beginning of the show, a member of parliament from the people's from Donetsk has been killed this morning or this afternoon. So, and now we're hearing from Vladimir Putin and the Kremlin that they're done with negotiations. So buckle your seatbelts, guys. It's coming over the next few days. Thank you so much for watching this segment here at Redacted. We are live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, trying to share the stories that the mainstream media will not cover. You should also come over and join our community of Redacted Rebels over at Redacted.inc. That's our private locals community where we can share exclusive content that we simply cannot share here on YouTube. Come over and join the rebellion together right now by going to Redacted.inc. We'll see you next time.